Hey there! So I noticed in 2015 you worked for the National Association of Ancient Babylonian Cabinet Making, and then in 2017 you worked for the National Association of Underwater Basket Weaving. Yeah, so there's a gap in my resume. I had to go to the doctor one time, and they had to remove a pint of fluid from my back, and then we had to raise the barn in the field with the animals, and it was my cousin's uncle's brother's sister's roommate. And you know, the thing about that was that it was just a bad fit for me, and so it was because I didn't have the right degree, and I just, you know, it wasn't my passion, and so you see, that's why there's a gap in my resume. Great. So can I ask you something? Have you been spending a lot of time lately explaining yourself? And if you have, why? And if you have been, who are you explaining yourself to? You know, nowadays you may have heard there's a lot of stereotypes out there about especially early professionals being super entitled, right? The early professional gets hired, and like within the first week of working in the new place, they want to know when they're going to get promoted, right? The new person gets hired, and they're giving all this advice about stuff they really don't know about, and even if they have, they haven't really been there long enough to know about what's going on in the place because they feel so entitled. I'll leave it to others to decide whether stereotypes about early professionals being entitled or not, how true those are. But what I do find really interesting is the opposite idea, right? The other side of the coin from entitlement is sort of like justification. And as much as sometimes people feel they're more entitled than maybe they should be, I notice often that some people feel like they have to explain themselves more than they probably do. After all, one could argue that really the only good reason that one ever needs to explain themselves is if they've made a prior commitment to somebody about something. So if and when I promise my boss that I'm going to get a report done by 5 o'clock on a Tuesday and something changes and that's not going to happen, I then owe my boss an explanation. I owe it to her to explain myself. If I make a promise to somebody and I can't keep that promise, or things change, of course, then the most professional thing to do is, of course, explain yourself, like as soon as you can, as thoroughly as you can, of course. But what I'm talking about is when people feel the need to explain themselves when they really haven't made a commitment to anybody. And really the only reason they feel the need to explain themselves to anybody is because they've blown it up in their mind as this thing that they need to explain. When really the only person that really is worried about it, about any kind of an explanation, is themselves. And chances are the other people that they're trying to explain it to, they really don't care, and the only reason they might care is because if there's this huge explanation, now they're like, well, what's that all about? Maybe I should worry. Maybe I do need an explanation. So just a quick friendly tip, if you find that you need to explain yourself a bunch, there's a really good chance you don't. And it might be worth looking at that to decide whether you really owe anybody else an explanation, or whether it's just something you've blown up and the real person you're really trying to explain it to is yourself. And if you don't need that explanation, then nobody else does either. And there's a good chance that you don't owe it to anybody. Hope this helps you win at work.